Hello, I'm here during the lunch rush with Janice, who owns her own food truck.
Best cheesesteaks in town.
Janice traded up to Geico Commercial Auto Insurance for her food truck business. We're here where she needs us most.
They sure are.
We make it so easy for her to save, with customised coverage that grows with her business. Sorry, I just get so emotional talking about saving folks money.
Not this onion I'm chopping?
It's just so beautiful. Oh yeah, no, it's the onion.
Get a commercial auto insurance quote today at geico.com and see how much you could save. It feels good to Geico.
This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hello everybody and welcome to Writers on Film. My name is John Bleasdale. I'm a writer and film critic, and today I am delighted to be joined by Laura Venning, who is a writer and critic herself and has recently written a book, a study on Greta Gerwig. Thank you so much for joining me, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to have an opportunity to actually talk about writing. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't it? I mean, we met for the first time in October because we were both at an event at the London Film Festival in that lovely library they've got at the South Bank Centre.
Oh yeah, such a gorgeous space. I was actually there last week doing a bit of work, although it was quite a snowy day in London, and the library wasn't too cold, but the rest of the BFI building was it felt like sub-zero temperatures, so it was a little less hospitable than usual. But that is quite unusual for the BFI. Normally it's very welcoming.
Normally it's very toasty, but yeah, no, on that occasion, no, that's a pity. We should write a letter.
Whack the heating up, lads. I know your building's glass, but Jesus, keep that heat in. It's freezing.
Well, the first question I really wanted to ask you is about your background, how you got into writing, how you got into the world of writing about cinema.
Yeah, I think for my first sort of interest in the world of film was that I thought I really wanted to be an editor. Mainly from, as a kid, watching my cousin make little kind of stop motion animation films and shooting little things. He was very interested in visual effects, and we do little tiny blue screen projects. And I just used to be so fascinated by watching him edit together the films, just on Premiere Pro years and years and years ago. And then at university, I did a course that was sort of 50-50 split between film and TV production and the practical side of things and academia. And by the time I got to the third year, I was like, oh, whoops, I actually really enjoy the academic side of things. I was pretty much the only person in the year who actually wanted to focus on that. And then...
what do you think made you like the academia more? What was the...
I mean, frankly, it was partly that I was good at it, whereas I was, it turns out, pretty shite at most of the other aspects of practical filmmaking. And I think I knew I lacked the maybe combination of patience and sheer tenacity and kind of self-belief that I think you have to make it as a filmmaker, because it is a uphill struggle all the way, as we know, to actually make films. I kind of can't believe anyone ever makes any films, let alone good ones. It's a kind of a miracle because of how hard it is.
It's sort of the patience as well you need. As a writer, you can just go, oh, screw this. I'll delete that and start again. But as a filmmaker, you're invested. You can't move the whole crew everywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very different, obviously. But I do think that that interest in editing and writing about film are kind of connected in a way, because you're sort of working with pre-existing material, as it were, and kind of getting into the how does this thing work? How can it work? How can it be pieced together in different ways? What does this image next to this image mean versus this image next to that image? Or I don't know, it doesn't feel completely disconnected. in a sense. But there's nothing like doing a week of work experience in a post-production office to make you go, I don't think I want to do this. So then after kind of farting around for a few years, not really knowing what I was doing, I did a film studies master's and kind of dipped my toe into the slightly less so now, but a few years ago, there was a really thriving community, particularly on Twitter, of kind of young, aspiring writers about film who had their own websites where you could sort of, you'd write for free, and it was a sort of good way of getting some experience, and you'd meet great people, and it was a real community. And then eventually that kind of graduated into actually getting paid money to do it, which still feels like a miracle. Then slightly out of nowhere got commissioned to write this book, and here we are. So basically the short answer is slowly, and with doing a fair amount of work for free at the beginning, and gradually making my way up the ladder, slowly but surely, which I think is a way that a lot of people, particularly of maybe of my age, who grew up with this kind of burgeoning internet community of film lovers. So R.I.P. Twitter, really, because that was such a place to find community and sort of quote unquote get discovered.
I was sad to leave, but in the end there was no real choice. I had sort of tens of thousands of followers as well, so it was like, I'm sure a fair number of those were bots, but it did feel like there was a real interchange and a real, as you say, a real community. And I certainly mourn its passing as any sort of viable public square. It's like you see the graffiti has gone up, and then the dog turds and the smell of piss is overpowering. And you begin to fear for your safety. That's in the end.
Also true, yeah.
Even before your writing in film, what were your sort of like first cinema experiences? Where did that begin? What were the filmmakers or the films, even before the filmmakers, the spark was struck of your interest?
I actually think, and this is somewhat embarrassing to admit now, that one of my, I think the first ever sort of behind the scenes featurettes that I ever saw were on my Harry Potter DVDs. I think that might have been a very early instance. I know for a lot of people my age, it was Lord of the Rings. And I wish it could have been Lord of the Rings, because that's a less embarrassing answer than probably the truth. But I think those were a real introduction into, these things don't just like spontaneously appear in front of you. There's a whole world of people making decisions behind this craft. And that I found fascinating. And I think I'd always been interested in, books and storytelling, but I think I knew even then I'm not a creative writer myself. I just didn't. I never quite. I used to enjoy it, as at school, but it wasn't really what I knew. It wasn't really what I yearned to do. I remember my English teacher being, I think, quite disappointed I didn't go off and do English at university, and I went off and did, film, DOS out subject. But that was slightly the
graffiti in the library of the university is coming to in the sort of the toilets of the university was always amusing on those grounds. It was usually in my day it was always sociology. It was people writing for sociology degree. Tear here with an arrow to the toilet paper.
Oh my God, brilliant. Yeah.
And then you go to the humanities library, and it would be, they would swap every now and again, but I imagine it was the same sort of snobbery.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I mean, I went to York, so York is, in many ways prestigious Russell Group University, but there were back then what I sort of think of as, I may have expanded now, but like two quote unquote DOS out course degrees. There was ours, and then there was the one that we used to make fun of, which was the writing, directing and performance lot, who did like theatre. And those guys, they really were at the bottom of the barrel. But
they're accepting Golden Globes today, so
I know, yeah.
thanks to York University and, and the
I know,
inspiration.
literally, yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, always a fascination with storytelling, but just not being quite sure of how I think partly just knowing I didn't have quite the creative brain suited to actually writing original work. I've no sense of, I've no real desire to ever get into actual screenwriting, because I know that is quite a crossover. Many critics and writers, wanting to move into screenwriting, but it just, I think, yeah, it just took a while for me to find exactly what I was interested in. And I think there are certain, I mean, once I started really getting interested in film as a teenager, my parents really put me on like a crash course, because I think they were like, oh, bonding activity of many of the classics with a capital C. And actually, the one that I think back to now as making the most impression, or the strongest impression at that age, was Picnic at Hanging Rock. That is a film that had an enormous impact on me, which I've only really registered quite how strongly recently, partly because it was there was a restoration re-released at the BFI last February for Valentine's Day, and seeing it again on the big screen, I was like, yeah, wow, that is a film to show a kind of 14, 15-year-old girl who's interested in film, for so many reasons. Partly, obviously, the subject matter, it being, not many classics, at least in the canon at that point, were about teenage girls. So even just that level of relatability, but also it's kind of frustrating, lack of, narrative conclusion, and it's kind of brilliant opaqueness and the atmosphere of the thing. I just that I remember that being like a real moment of, oh wow, okay, these are not all the not all the slightly, dare I say, stuffy black and white films that my parents were determined to get me to sit through, which many of them now I love, but when you're 15, it's a bit of a little bit of a slog, some of them.
I
And
read the
yeah,
I read the novel on which Picnic at Hanging Rock is based, Before Christmas, and I absolutely recommend it. It's a really good book. I mean, I think any Australian listener will be saying, "Yeah, duh." It's
yeah,
one of the
obviously, yeah.
classic of Australian literature, but it's so good. And yet, Peter Weir does something with that book which is also remarkable. I mean, I seem to remember there was some story about them having a much more sort of conclusive ending, and they decided no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It has to be open.
Yeah. I think the novel does have. I haven't read it. I've somehow ended up with two copies in my flat and have not read either of them. But I really should. I think part of me is
What you
afraid
have
of
to do
like,
then is read them both at the same time.
yeah,
You have to hold them one per hand.
exactly. Yeah, I think there is some weird part of me that's like, I love the film so much, and I almost don't want it to be touched by anything else, even the original text it's based on, which is silly. I really should read it. Maybe when I'm feeling really, really cold. In wintry London, I can travel to the outback in my mind. I think it did have a concluding chapter, or maybe it was only in later editions, where there was some explanation offered as to what happened to the girls. I remember reading an extract that talked about someone making their way up to the top of the rock and seeing like their clothes like suspended in the air, which is such a like simple but terrifying image somehow. But yes, I adore that film, and I think Peter Weir is kind of a genius. And,
Oh, he's got such a
yeah.
hit. He's got such a hit rate as well. I mean, he's he's got a good 5 or 6 straight out masterpieces in his filmography.
And I do admire that versatility. Like, obviously, that's all really on display for him. So yeah, I actually, and maybe Picnic at Hanging Rock was actually, thinking back, was what got me onto Jane Campion, because I think from there it wasn't much of a leap to the piano, and Jane Campion was a director who I just was like, oh wow, which I think is quite a common experience, particularly for young women getting into film, which I was slightly before the kind of, what I think of as the kind of fourth wave of feminism suddenly becoming, fashionable and okay to talk about around about 2015, 2016. And, before the resurgence of people like Agnes Varda and many other examples. But yeah, Jane Campion was a kind of early filmmaker I encountered and was just like, wow.
incredibly powerful. I mean, that was a real moment where 90s cinema was, was to some degree being dominated by people like Tarantino and people like that were being very, the very masculine vision. And then suddenly there comes this powerful female voice. And really, I remember going to see that at the cinema twice because it was just, I mean, I might have even seen it three times because I just wanted to be back in that world. It's like you say about the Outback. I wanted to go back to New Zealand and be surrounded by that music, that cinematography once more.
Yeah, God, absolutely. Yeah. So her films definitely had an enormous impact. And I was lucky in that when I was at university doing my dissertation in my third year, my dissertation supervisor, Duncan Petrie, is one of the kind of world's leading experts on New Zealand cinema. So he was thrilled when I wanted to write about Jane Campion. And at the time it was the first series of Top of the Lake, her crime series. And I just remember him taking out that he was so excited, and he got out this enormous folder of, photocopied and scanned bits of newspaper and articles from years and years and years, and of work which I would never have been able to find by myself, or would have taken years and years. And he just slammed it all down, like,
there you go.
Off you go. Gave me a pirated copy of Angel at My Table on DVD because it was impossible to get at that point. And happy days.
And so let's move along to, well, you started talking then about that sort of fourth wave of feminism and that moment in which people like Greta Gerwig did begin to emerge. So how do you place her in this sort of context of filmmakers?
Yeah, I mean, obviously she had this prominent career as an actor, and I suppose, okay, so Lady Bird is 2017, so I think it really hit, she really hit a moment of when people were, I think, really hungry for, I mean, some of these terms unfortunately now sound quite cliched, but female-led stories. And it I think, Lady Bird, I know for her, had been in the works for years and years, and originally was a kind of 4-hour-long epic called Mothers and Daughters. And I think one of the things that makes her writing so brilliant is she knows how to take an enormous Bible that she's put together and get it down and down and down and down and down till it's as lean and as and efficient. But I think in that kind of immediate post-Trump world, I wish we lived in a post-Trump world. It feels silly to phrase it like that, but what felt like the immediate, post-Trump's win rather world, there was this particular hunger for female-led stories and a weariness at the world of kind of indie filmmaking, having been, dominated by these, many of them brilliant, but overwhelmingly male filmmakers telling stories about men. And many of these films that I love, but they were overwhelmed. And I think it also really, that film, particularly Lady Bird, captured an audience of up and coming, people slightly younger than me, actually. You're kind of 18, 19, year old aspiring writers and about film and aspiring filmmakers. And I think that is such a key text. And I sort of, she obviously came up as part of the mumblecore movement, and ironically has talked quite a lot, well, I think less so now, but has talked previously about how she never really, mumblecore was never really her style, that she actually enjoyed it. Just sort of happened to be the way that she fell into it from people she knew in her sort of college days in New York.
She's kind of a bigger actress than that, isn't she? She's she's more dramatic. She's more eye-catching.
Exactly, yeah. And she never really cared for improv, which obviously a lot of those mumblecore films are sort of loosely improvised, or even when they were a bit more written, still had that feel. Whereas she really gravitated towards a more precisely written style, even though that could result in slightly more naturalistic, things that feel naturalistic but are in fact and truthful and emotionally truthful, but are in fact actually very, very precisely written. Yeah, it's so interesting to see people like, the Safdie brothers kind of came up in that scene a little bit, and Mary Bronstein, who's got, if I had legs, I'd kick you, and Greta Gerwig was in her first film, her only other film, Yeast, which is, couldn't be further away from the kind of films that Greta Gerwig is making now, but she's such a kind of fantastic screen presence. She really pops in a way that some of those other mumblecore actors, I feel like, don't. And it's no wonder that she, eventually got a little bit courted by Hollywood and could have had a very different career if that had. The thing I find wild is that she was cast in the pilot for a spin-off of the sitcom How I Met Your Mother, which was, I think, just called How I Met Your Father. And they made a pilot and it tested so poorly.
Clever.
Yeah, I know.
I see what they did there.
I know. And that never went anywhere. And like, my God, what things could have been very different if she'd been locked into an incredibly successful, long-running sitcom. She's also, you kind of hate to attribute her success to anyone else, but I think meeting Noah Baumbach was a huge turning point in her career, and really made her understand, really sort of made her think, this is the style of writing that I want to do. These are the kind of stories that I want to tell, but slightly less from a kind of divorced dad perspective, which is, I like Noah Baumbach. I like some of his films a lot, but, I think he's at his most humane and most fun and most kind of grounded when he's working with her, and it was, that she kind of co-wrote Frances Ha working with Noah Baumbach for their second time, but I don't think she had any writing influence on Greenberg, their first film together. But Frances Ha was really where I think the two of them began working together, and she understood, came to understand what she really wanted to do. Yeah.
It could be seen as a bit of a turning point for him as well, in that sense.
So true. Yeah.
Greenberg wasn't as well written as Frances Ha, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Jay Kelly,
voices,
which he hasn't written with her, and presumably she's been very busy with her Narnia film. Suffers intensely from a. I find it kind of extraordinary that film is by the same guy who did Frances Ha and Marriage Story and the Maya Witt stories, and I wasn't a fan.
No, I found it a bit of a, I don't know. Jay Kelly, for me, it was like a perfectly nice time that I've simply never thought about ever again.
There's becoming a genre called the Netflix movie, which sort of like, it's there, it's in my watch list if I've got nothing else to watch,
Absolutely. Although it was a joy to see Greta Gerwig actually on screen, albeit briefly, in it, playing Adam Sandler's wife. I do miss her presence as a comic actress, but yeah, I think sometimes the self-indulgence gets the better of Noah Baumbach, and Jay Kelly really felt like it was just a puff piece somehow in the form of a film. But I'm so glad everyone got a nice holiday in Tuscany. That was my main feeling coming out of it. It's like they all got to go to Tuscany and eat pasta and drink wine and have a lovely time, and good for them. But
yeah, and get trapped on a train of people who never ever existed.
Yeah, truly. Oh God.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. I'll stop kicking the movie. But yeah. Well, so you have a really fascinating sort of coming of age story and a sort of relationship drama and comedy with Lady Bird, and then she goes from that into like a period piece and a sort of very large. I mean, was Little Women like a big Hollywood picture?
Yeah, it was Sony joint. Although what's interesting is that actually before
Sony joint, like
yeah,
like the guys at Sony are like
I know,
Spike Lee.
I know.
They'd love that. They
I
absolutely love
know,
that.
right? Yeah, I do get into the habit of saying that just because I don't know, I find it funny.
Well, yeah, you've won a fan. I'm gonna start using
Excellent. Okay, Sony joint. Yeah, she had been. I think the way that I've heard it is that a new adaptation of Little Women had been in the works for a long time, basically because of Amy Pascal at Sony. You know, that her using her power and influence to be like, this is what the story I want to tell. I want a new Little Women. But there'd been various failed attempts. Like Sarah Polley had written a script, which, you know, that never went anywhere. And Greta Gerwig had heard about this new Little Women adaptation and kind of, you know, the way she tells it is she really like threw herself forward and was like, me, please, I know I haven't directed a film before, but that doesn't matter. And Amy Pascal basically commissioned her to write a script, but based on how much she had liked Frances Ha. So Gerwig had written this script, but it wasn't until the success of Lady Bird later that she was sort of entrusted with the responsibility of actually directing the thing as well. So I think in many ways, actually, Little Women is, I mean, she's talked about it as her most personal film because of her like profoundly strong connection with the novel and her identity feeling very intertwined with Jo's as a writer, with Jo March's as a writer. So despite all the autobiographical elements of Lady Bird, of which there are a fair few, you know, in many ways, Little Women was sort of her kind of big announcement of what she really wanted to do, especially because also Greta Gerwig's always kind of said, I want to be a big Hollywood studio director. So as much as it's a little bit of a shame that we probably won't see another Lady Bird from her, it is what she's always wanted to do and has never kind of, you know, has always been fairly open about that. So, but yeah, it was a huge leap. And I think it was a bit of an act of faith. And maybe, you know, Amy Pascal was the only person who would have entrusted her with that huge leap in budget and, you know, the text that's so beloved and working for a studio. But I think it's such a masterpiece of adaptation. I think it's fascinating because I'd actually never read Little Women. It's not as much of a like, you know, I think in America, for American girls, it's such a kind of everyone reads this when they're a child. I get the impression anyway. And I, you know, in the UK, not so much. My mum always found it very like cloying because there are quite a lot of like religious lessons to be learned about being a good girl in Little Women. You know, there's quite a lot of that stuff. But also the book is very kind of forward thinking in other ways and very much about women's ambition. And I think the way Greta Gerwig brings the two timelines together and interweaves them, and each has more impact from being placed next to the other. I think it's a genius work of adaptation. And it's the period drama still has the power to cut through and make an impact, which is nice because I have not a guilty pleasure love of them exactly, but a little touch of that. And just to see someone make a period drama and make it exciting, make it fresh, and it really connect with people. It was exciting.
I think there is a thing as well of sort of like really great directors, you know, having a crack at it. You know, Scorsese with Age of Innocence, you know, Barry Lyndon with Kubrick. There's that, you know. Obviously Merchant Ivory made, you know, a whole ton of these, but there is also a sense of like, Ang Lee with
Sense and Sensibility, which is like one of my favorite films of all time. I am obsessed, and I think he's, you know, the absolute perfect person to have directed that film. Because no, you know what, I'm not going to go on a huge thing about how much I love that film. That's not really very relevant, but yes, Ang Lee.
But I mean, it is in the sense of, the period drama. There's an element that sort of Bridgerton has, to some degree, is. I'm saying this without ever having watched an episode of Bridgerton, but doing the chocolate box version of it, let's say.
Yes.
And instead of you having the whole barrel of quality streets, you only have the purple ones. If that analogy makes any sense.
No, it absolutely.
But so what I mean is there are directors who are really who are proving their mettle in this genre in a really interesting way. And also I think you've got a sense of Little Women, it being a tale oft repeated or oft but you have the Elizabeth Taylor version, then you have the Winona Ryder version. It's also something which is kind of defined by its cast, I feel. Instead of saying, I can't even remember who did the Winona Ryder. Was it George Stevens did the Elizabeth Taylor? But there's
oh gosh, and then there's the Katharine Hepburn one as well, which I haven't seen.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's So I mean, it's kind of that's how we name them. We name them after the actress. So there's also a sense of Greta Gerwig getting this cast together, and it's almost like a generational definition of like, okay, this is our Little Women for now. It's Saoirse Ronan, Florence Pugh.
It's like Who's Your Batman, but for girls. It's like, I mean, actually now there've been too many Batmen. Maybe Who's Your Spider-Man is a better analogy, because
who's your James Bond?
Yeah, exactly. Who's your Joe March? And I think, again, probably from her experience as an actor, I think she's amazing at working with actors and casting. And initially she was quite hesitant to cast Saoirse Ronan. I think she didn't even think about it, because she was like, well, I need to work with new people after Lady Bird. And apparently Saoirse Ronan had heard about this, had heard on the grapevine about this film, and marched up to Greta Gerwig at an awards ceremony, basically said, I'm going to play Jo. And Greta Gerwig would that's a very Jo March thing to do. So let's talk about it. But yeah, I think actors seem to absolutely love working with her, and she's very good at building ensembles, as demonstrated by all three of her films. Actually, they're all quite big casts of pretty incredible people who make an impact even in a small role, and that was obvious from Lady Bird. I mean, the incredible Tracy Letts. I just love his performances in both in Lady Bird and in Little Women, and just building the ensembles outwards. I think she's fantastic at that. Chalamet, obviously, she was early on the Chalamet train. She recognized that kid had something, and I think he's incredible he's so funny in Lady Bird, and so touching in Little Women. I think he's perfect in those films.
I want to see him in James and the Giant Peach, but that's just my own personal.
Wait, playing James or playing one of the insects?
Playing James.
Checking.
It's a Call Me by Your Name reference.
Oh God, of course. I didn't even think of that. I was like, he's so thin and spidery. Maybe he could play. Wait, no, the spider is Miss Spider. He could. Maybe in a few years he could be the grasshopper. Fluid. Or true. Oh boy, yeah.
The Golden Globes were quite funny last night. They had quite a few Chalamet jokes, and he won, didn't he? He won for Marty Supreme.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the Globes are funny the way they separate comedy and musical, so it gives everyone, all the people who are probably going to lose out on the Oscar get a Golden Globe because of the way the split categories work. But I think if they ever go with like non-gender based roles categories, they should introduce a generic division just to make more people winners. If the problem is, okay, you're only going to have one actor a year get a lead role, then you should make it a lead for sort of comedy, a lead for drama. I do think that's the way forward, because it seemed like at the BIFAs this year, where I think they do sort of gender neutral categories, it does mean though that all the winners are like the same men over and over again. It's like, this is actually, so you've slightly shot yourselves in the foot here. Like, I get the good intentions behind this, but anyway, yeah.
Who could have foreseen it like that?
Well,
Except
exactly,
except
yeah.
for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is a run of some. She's got a pretty good run going at the moment. Lady Bird, really well received, award winning, and makes money. And then Little Women, hugely successful on a commercial point of view, but also very well regarded and against stiff competition. I mean, you're doing that, as you say, this monumental text. It's really easy to fall on your face if you get it wrong. And then she goes for Barbie. And I remember, like a lot of people, I sort of thought, wait a minute, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah, absolutely.
What was your reaction when you heard about that?
Oh, definitely the same.
Right.
Both eyebrows raised about as high as they could go. But I mean, also an element of, I do trust that you know what you're doing.
Did your voice go up that higher pitch as well?
It probably did. I do think she knows what she's doing, so maybe this will be interesting. And yeah, Barbie is a funny one. In many ways, writing the book gave me a bit more of an understanding of what appealed to her about it and why she wanted to do it and how it came about. I think genuinely a big part of it was that she and Noah Baumbach was basically like, it's not exactly forced into co-writing it, but she was slightly like, we're writing this together, and he was like, what? And she was like, yeah, this is what we're doing, and we're locked inside because it's COVID, and the two of them in really it was in lockdown that they wrote it. And what she has said about it is that it was slightly their madcap vision of a kind of a response to the feeling of, oh God, what if we never get to make films again because we're trapped in here, and what's going to happen to the industry, and let's just write something kind of big and insane and kind of see what we can get away with. And we have this idea of doing it on sound stages and making it look like a Technicolor 50s Minnelli musical, and that really comes off. And it was a film, I think, that I enjoyed it immensely when I saw it in the cinema, but partly because my local cinema was doing themed Oppenheimer and Barbie cocktails, which were only £5 each. So I'd had 2 pink Barbie Cosmos by the time that the film had started, and hadn't had a big lunch. So I was having a lovely time when, I'm Just Ken started happening, and I understood the reference. I was like, she's doing the Dream Ballet from Singing in the Rain. And I see this reference and I love it so deeply. I think I practically screamed out loud out of pure joy that was happening. But of course, the big Barbie and Oppenheimer summer, the actual film itself in a way got a little bit lost in all the discourse about capitalism and box office and, commercialism, etc. That, I think it wasn't until quite, a long time later, like well over a year later, that I actually rewatched it to write the book and was like, oh, this thing is actually really fresh and funny and inventive. And yes, it doesn't really interrogate a lot of the issues with Barbie as a cultural sort of figure. And yes, it did get bogged down in kind of the excessive merchandising is almost what the film is trying to sort of make jokes about and rail against, but at the same time it kind of has it. Mattel has its cake and eats it, is what I'm saying in a long-winded way. But yeah, I mean, isn't that true of so much Hollywood product? I mean, there's an element of Hollywood which is, the entire thing is a business model, and you can be subversive, but it's almost always it's very rarely versive. Yes. No, exactly. And I think she sort of saw this as like, I've always wanted to make, she grew up loving those, giant musicals. I've always wanted to, I feel she felt I've always wanted to make one of those. This is my opportunity to kind of work with a big budget where I can do that kind of stuff. And like, yes, it's Barbie, but what a kind of fascinating, cultural icon to try and do something with. And I think, it's amazing what they let her do. The 2001 piss take, which is so
Yeah.
brilliant. And, you know, jokes about Proust Barbie. I don't think they would have let anyone else do something like that, but because she had, you know, I feel that I think she might be a kind of record holder for the only female director to have her only or first 3 films nominated for Best Picture. Like that is a pretty incredible thing, which I feel like we can't help but take for granted.
She's kind of made it look easy, hasn't she? There's an element of like, hang on a minute, this you know, it's hard enough for anybody to get a film made. It's much harder for a woman to get a film made, and it's much harder for a woman to get a series of films made. You know,
let alone getting nominated for Best Picture. Yeah,
precisely.
God.
Yeah.
And she's popping them out. It's and also like raising kids at the same time. It is quite mad. And you know, she felt that she had to keep her pregnancy hidden on the set of Little Women, and all the cast just thought, oh, she's changed her style and she's really into big dresses and big coats now. But no, she was actually quite heavily pregnant, and I think, you know, I can't remember whether it was wrapping on set or finishing the editing and then giving birth like immediately. So yeah. She's proof, I suppose, that women can have it all, but my God, she does make it look easy.
yeah. That's self-control right there.
Absolutely. Don't pop until
I'm gonna uncross my legs as soon as we've locked, and then
literally
off we go.
unlock. Yeah.
And so now she's working on the Narnia. Is it The Magician's Nephew? Is the first Narnia?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I don't think it's really been officially been announced, but it seems like she's doing Magician's Nephew first, which is quite. It also helps that coincidentally, as a child, I was a huge fan of Narnia, so I know my Narnia stuff already, which helps. It's quite unorthodox because you know, then when people adapt Narnia, they naturally start with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which was the first book that C.S. Lewis wrote, and then later wrote this prequel, The Magician's Nephew. And The Magician's Nephew is such a strange book, but in a way, knowing what I know about Gerwig's creative process, I'm like, it makes so much sense actually that you would want to do the really weird one first, because she's very interested in religion, I think, and philosophy. And you know, I think, as everyone knows, the Narnia books are very much about Christianity. And the Magician's Nephew is all about, you know, the making of the world. And it's very surreal. I haven't read it since I was a kid. So I'm so intrigued. And I think we'll see some of the kind of philosophical stuff that we saw in Barbie, about kind of Barbie as this figure of, you know, leaving the Garden of Eden and gaining self-knowledge, you know, at what cost. I think that's going to come through even more strongly in these Narnia films. I just hope that it doesn't get bogged down in too much like Netflix CGI sheen that we saw a little bit with Del Toro's Frankenstein, which actually is a film I like very much, but it does have that Netflix touch, which is a shame. Yeah,
I agree with you. I really enjoyed Frankenstein when I saw it at the cinema in Venice, but I sort of thought this is a sort of film that unlike J. Kelly, I'll probably never watch on Netflix, because I'll watch it when I'm locked in a room on a huge screen with massive sound around me, and I can just go with it. But if there's any opportunity for me to get up and go and make a cup of tea, then I'll probably lose its magic. The Tom Schoen, who I interviewed. Well, I interviewed for the wrap. We did a wrap of 2025, but we also talked about Greengrass, his new book about Greengrass. He is currently, I think I'm allowed to say, he's been going on the set of the new Gerwig film, and so I think it is The Magician's Nephew.
Okay, yeah.
I think I'm pretty sure that's already out there in public. Otherwise, Tom will be very, very angry.
No, I think you're right. I think you are. I'm just hesitant to be like, it's definitely this, just in case I don't want to get like in trouble. But no, I think you're right. Yeah.
I think it's a good move to not make The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, just because we've got one so recently in our heads that it would be a comparison that would be, you know, whereas in this sense, I think it gives her an opportunity to establish a look and a world that then she can go and tell the other stories if this one proves to be successful, because I assume this is the first of a franchise essentially.
I would imagine so. And obviously, yeah, just to be clear to listeners, if you don't know your Narnia, I don't think anyone has properly adapted Magician's Nephew before, because it's so strange. Like, people start with Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and then follow through on some of the other books because they follow initially the same group of children and then kind of spin. Yeah, no one does the first book or the last book, the last battle, because the last battle is also insane, but even more insane, and that, because it's about the end of the world. And poor Susan doesn't get to go to heaven because she dared to become interested in lipstick and tights. That's like the end of the last Narnia book, which Philip Pullman always kind of rails against as him being a staunch atheist. And anyway, I'm getting sidetracked, but I think there's so much space for her to do something really interesting. And so I also I agree, very wise not to start with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because there's only so many ways you can do kids going into a wardrobe, lion, so those images are so well known, that starting with something fresh, I think, is a good idea.
Yeah, and James McAvoy as Mr. Tompkins, it's going to be really difficult to match his.
Yeah, and I mean, Tilda Swinton as the White Witch in those Disney, I think, film from 2005. I'm very attached because as a child I used to get the late 80s BBC adaptation, which we borrowed it on video from the library, and I had a great fondness for those, no matter how rickety. But Tilda Swinton as the White Witch, that's going to be tough to beat.
Yeah, and I remember the covers of the books, all the paperback books, that they always had those wonderful little paintings on the cover, really nicely illustrated. Was it difficult for you to write a book where you've got a filmmaker with three very different, very interesting films, but only three films? What was it like, sort of dealing with someone with such a small amount of work?
I mean, in some ways, actually quite nice, because it meant that I had a pretty small word count to hit, and I felt able to go in quite deeply on each of the three. Whereas a good friend of mine, Emily Maskell, had the same word count to write about Wes Anderson. It's a very different task, because he's got 12 films or something. It meant that I could go deeper and a bit longer, and I maybe would have struggled a bit more had it not been for her acting career, which I felt really was a quite natural and fairly sort of obvious leading trajectory into her work as a filmmaker. Initially, I initially had the sense of it would be so nice to not do it in a chronological order, taking inspiration from Hannah Strong's great book about Sofia Coppola, where she's able to sort of pair the films thematically together rather than just to do a straightforward chronology. But I was like, wait, there's only three films. I have to just do this chronologically. We can't be doing things out of order. But in the future, I would love to write that way, because chronology is not the most inventive way of doing it. But for this, it was sort of the only way that made sense. But even though we were given quite a lot of creative freedom, even though working with this very commercial publisher, we were given quite a free rein. But I just thought, got to go straight down the middle with this.
The most bizarre book I've ever read in terms of chronology is The Life and Death of Peter Sellers, which is massive. It's over 1,000 pages long.
Oh wow!
And it's totally achronological. It's just the chronology sort of begins to develop about page 500.
Oh god!
but it's just all over the place, and yet it's absolutely amazing. And it's kind of the point becomes very apparent that the reason it is so all over the place is because it is a portrait of a madman. And so,
right, yes,
the book itself is mad.
Oh, how fascinating!
It's really, it's not for the faint-hearted, but it is one of the best film books and one of the best biographies, full stop, I've ever read.
Really.
What are you working on next? What's the next project?
Great question. I don't really know. Well, we'll see if
That's on your LinkedIn page. Available for work.
Yeah, exactly. Very available for work. Hire me, please. Well, we'll see how we're in that post-Christmas. Oh, I wonder how those books sold over Christmas. So, whether I get commissioned to do another one, whether I don't, we don't know. We don't know yet. I would love to do another one. Because what a joy to be given the time and the opportunity to research one single person and go deep into one topic, because normally I'm bouncing around writing reviews, so I'm bouncing around between topics all the time. But right now I'm actually in the middle of researching something sort of adjacent but quite different. At the end of January, I'm doing a talk at the BFI as part of the Women with a Movie Camera Summit, which is about Westerns directed by women, which is a very niche subject matter. That's because there's not many of them. There's charitably, there's about 10. And that's kind of, cheating a little bit with some of the parameters. But this was what my master's dissertation was about, and even since I did that, we've had Power of the Dog, we've had by Jane Campion, who I love, and we've had First Cow by Kelly Reichardt, and there's been a few more films to play with. But
Meek's Cut Off by Kelly Reichardt as well.
Yeah, there's not many. There's The Rider by Chloe Zhao. So it's interesting that recently there's been a little bit of an upswing. Ravenous by Antonia Bird, which I hadn't seen until recently, which is amazing.
Film. And Antonia Bird, a really underrated and, slightly forgotten. I mean, her thriller Face with Robert Carlyle and Damon Albarn from Blur is really well worth a watch as well.
I need to see that, because the only other film of hers I've seen is Priest, which is fantastic.
Well, there you go.
No, she's
what a great director.
Yeah, I know. It's totally underappreciated. I guess partly because she worked mostly in television, and Ravenous was a bit of a financial disaster, which is such a shame because it's so good, so funny and disgusting and just brilliant. So that's been a really fun project, but that's still ongoing. I have to be careful to keep to half an hour, and that's gonna be the hardest thing with my clips, making sure it's only half an hour and I don't waffle on forever.
What's the date of that?
That is the 24th of January.
Okay, so coming up. Okay,
come on down to the South Bank, and
Excellent. And final question. I always ask this at the end of the podcast, but I'd like a recommended film book off you, a book that you wish to recommend to our listeners.
Well, bear with me one sec, because I'm just going to grab it off the shelf, so I can remember who edited it. Right, so hopefully no one's recommended this before, but if they have, never mind. This is a lovely book of essays called In the Good Seats, Essays on Film, which I was given for my birthday last year. And it's a collection of writers who I think generally actually don't write about film, and that's one of the things that actually makes it quite refreshing. I think these are mostly novelists, essayists on other subjects, but just writing about the films and the cinematic experiences that they've had, that they love. There's an Ali Smith chapter in here, which is brilliant. Obviously, she's probably the best known writer, but there's a brilliant essay on watching The Wizard of Oz on telly, which is called Because. Is that the right number of becauses? Anyway, In the Good Seats, which is published by PVA Books, and I think it's Northern Irish or Irish. Apologies. I think it's an Irish publication, and highly recommend In the Good Seats, Essays on Film. So great.
Excellent. No, nobody has ever recommended that, and I've not heard of it either. So I shall be putting that on my to read list. Brilliant. Fabulous. Thank you so much, Laura, and thanks for joining me on Writers on Film.
Thank you so much for having me and for listening to me waffle on about all the research that I did, which is still in my brain. It turns out I thought I'd forgotten all of it, but yeah, it's still in there.
It will never go away.